I faced discrimination throughout my life because of my sister, the golden child. At last, I found my sweet revenge on the day of my wedding. My entire life was marked by discrimination due to my sister being the favored one, and she even attempted to walk down the aisle during my wedding. Ultimately, I got my revenge. My parents consistently showed favoritism towards my sister, and it was glaringly obvious. Whenever she accused me of something, they would take her side and punish me. However, if I accused her, even with solid evidence, they would scold me as well as punish her. On my birthday, my cake always had to be her favorite flavor, and my parents pretended they didn't know I disliked it. They consistently bought her more gifts than me and took us to places of her choosing, even when it was supposed to be my celebration. My sister grew up indulged, treating me like a punching bag. Initially, she mostly ignored me, but things escalated during our teenage years. Eventually, she found herself without friends, and her behavior took a turn for the worse. I'm not sure if her friends abandoned her because she was unkind, as we were never close. My parents took pride in her accomplishments but overlooked any issues she had. In contrast, they constantly pointed out my flaws as if they were a source of amusement. I only realized she didn't have friends because we attended the same school, and I noticed she was alone. Meanwhile, I was quite popular. My sister became aware of this and transformed me from a rare target into someone she felt compelled to undermine constantly. She began accusing me and my friends of various things. My parents forbade me from hanging out with anyone, using excuses like, "They're not good people according to your sister," or "Why do you want to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time?" What saved me from total isolation was my extended family. Most of them lived nearby, and I got along well with my cousins despite some age gaps. At one gathering, they invited me to an event I can't recall, and I sadly replied that I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. When they asked why, my innocent self bluntly stated it was because I wasn't allowed to have friends since my sister didn't have any. This information reached the adults, who apparently confronted my parents later. I was scolded for lying and grounded for a month, but afterward, they granted me some freedom, making it worth it. My sister changed schools, likely because the embarrassment of our extended family knowing her social status was too much, so she insisted on switching, and my parents complied. Even though it cost them more since the new school was farther away, she quickly made friends there. However, she never reverted to mostly ignoring me. Feeling empowered to torment me and upset that I revealed to the family she had no friends, she clung to me. Life remained challenging. Her friends would come over and bully me, which my parents dismissed as light teasing. I never invited friends over because either my parents were terrible hosts or my sister would accuse them of stealing, and my parents always believed her. I did grow close to my cousins, though, as my parents never dared treat family that way. Then I got my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him home, but my parents insisted. At one point we got separated, and he came looking for me to tell me my sister was flirting with him. She approached him in revealing clothing, batting her eyelashes, and started telling him how terrible I was and how wonderful she was. He was annoyed and quickly left to find me. Of course, my sister told my parents a different story, claiming my boyfriend had tried to flirt with her, but she naturally rejected him since she couldn't betray me. Guess who my parents believed? My boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I readily believed him for a spiteful reason. Keep in mind, I was a teenager suffering from unjust treatment. I was extremely resentful and moody, harboring as much hatred for my sister as she did for me. With that context established, let's move on to appearances. I hadn't mentioned them yet because they didn't seem relevant. My parents were overweight and expressed love through food, constantly offering more snacks and treats. My sister was also overweight while I was not. I've always been somewhat slender, as punishment often involved withholding treats or snacks. Clearly, weight isn't what matters. It's personality. But my sister was already rude and spoiled back then. Even her attempts at flirting fell flat because she never learned to earn anything. She simply demanded, and my parents complied. Moreover, she didn't resemble some glamorous model, so even my self-conscious teenage self didn't believe my boyfriend would cheat on me with her. Anyway, my parents forbade me from dating such a terrible boy. I tried to continue secretly, but it was challenging, and the relationship eventually ended. I found another boyfriend, but once again, my sister accused him of flirting with her when he rejected her advances. Once more, my parents sided with her. I tried to point out this recurring pattern, but they concluded I was incapable of making good choices and simply kept picking bad boyfriends. The relationship couldn't withstand the Romeo-Juliet dynamic and fizzled out again. In high school, I was labeled a slut because I was fine with making out with boys but refused to enter into relationships. Fortunately, that never reached my sister or parents. During this time, my sister brought one boyfriend home. He was showcased with pride, and my parents spent every moment praising him and questioning why I couldn't be like my sister and find someone like that. Until he stopped appearing, and suddenly, he was a deceitful jerk who had tricked my sister. Oh well, and the unequal treatment persisted. At this point, she had more spending money, and her curfews were far more lenient than mine. She was free to go wherever she wanted, while I couldn't. If I pointed this out, my parents would claim it was because she was older, but when I reached that age, I still didn't receive the same treatment she did. When I highlighted this, They denied ever saying that or insisted it was because I couldn't be trusted like she was, using her accusations against my boyfriends and friends as evidence of my poor judgment. Time passed, and it was my sister's graduation day. She got accepted into a college, though not a prestigious one, and she didn't have any scholarships. Once again, only her achievements were shared with me, so I have no idea which colleges she even applied to or how badly she was rejected. I do know her grades were poor in school, as any time she received a B, we would celebrate. I usually earned good grades, but my parents refused to celebrate, claiming since I always performed well, there was nothing to celebrate. My parents naturally made a big deal and told her they would cover all expenses. I felt relieved she would be leaving, not that it made my life any easier. She always returned home every other weekend, and somehow, things kept disappearing from my room or other issues arose that she created to make my life miserable. My curfews remained strict. Eventually, my mom came to discuss my upcoming graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister. She told me that since they were paying for my sister's college, they had no funds for mine. Therefore, it would be better for me to start working immediately after graduation and wait until my sister finished university to see if they could afford anything for me. Oh, and if I chose to stay at home, I'd have to cover all my expenses, including part of the bills and rent. I pointed out that I could take out student loans. Mom agreed but added that they were so caring towards me and had such little faith in my judgment that they would decide whether a college was worth me going into debt for. I wasn't sure how they would prevent me from getting loans, but I didn't ask. Scholarships weren't mentioned. They had no idea what my grades were anymore and never believed in my abilities anyway. I didn't flinch. I simply said okay. My mom clearly didn't expect that and kept probing. Maybe she hoped I'd throw a tantrum, giving them an excuse to never pay for my college, but I remained silent, stating that I understood their position, thanking them for their concern, and that was that. My dad later tried the same approach, but I also refused to show any emotion. You see, after a lifetime of their poor parenting, I had no expectations regarding my education. I knew they would find an excuse not to pay for mine and make my life difficult. I never believed they would eventually pay if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for college for a long time. I could barely go out, my friendships were minimal, so I had ample time to study. And study I did, as I viewed college as my only chance for freedom. Well, the time arrived, and I worked tirelessly to secure a scholarship, not to any Ivy League or prestigious program like law or medical school, but it was a solid course at a decent college with a full scholarship. Knowing my sister would despise it and attempt to thwart me through my parents, I announced my achievement on social media simultaneously while informing them, even forcing myself to thank them in the post. Now they couldn't forbid me from going, as they would have to explain to the family why not. Initially, they were even somewhat proud and boasted about it, but then I suppose my sister influenced them, and they changed their tune, even asking if I was really sure I wanted to attend. They let slip that my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than I did, I would likely suffer worse. I obviously stood my ground. They weren't pleased but couldn't do anything. College became my salvation. I started to feel happy. I still kept in touch with my parents and visited during holidays, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could easily excuse my absences due to financial constraints. During this period, I avoided introducing any men to them, and my sister eventually dropped out of college. I know she didn't graduate because if she had, my parents would have made a fuss about it. She moved back home without paying any bills or rent, but my parents insisted it was different. She started working at the same company as my mom, obviously due to my mom's influence. This was all presented to me as a point of pride. Almost there, I promise. I met my husband around this time. You know those people who say, if I were in that situation, I would have done something. My husband is the type who actually takes action. I'm the type who is meek and lets things slide, only to lie awake at night wishing I had done something or thought of a clever retort. I'm the person who cries when I'm angry. My husband, on the other hand, is quick to respond. He thrives on drama and loves to resolve it. He's the type who, if he doesn't immediately respond to a slight, you better start worrying because he won't forgive and forget. Instead, he'll plot something worse for revenge. He wanted me to post about our experiences and even considered sharing on a revenge forum, but ultimately decided what we did wasn't extreme enough. People were surprised that I ended up with him, but just because I couldn't act like him due to my upbringing didn't mean I didn't appreciate it. I love that my husband does what I can't, and he treats people well as long as they reciprocate. When we discussed marriage, we decided we didn't care much about the ceremony due to our budget. We preferred to spend on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. As for the location, since his family was scattered and mine was still primarily in my hometown, we chose to have the wedding there. We didn't live too far away, so we could make long trips on weekends to handle arrangements. Additionally, there was some work flexibility, allowing us to stay in my hometown for a while if necessary. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. At this point, my parents naturally insisted on meeting my fiancé. I wanted to stand my ground and refuse, but I found it difficult. Distance had made me reconsider whether my parents were really that bad. Well, my husband looked as if I had cancelled Christmas when I told him I would at least ensure they were never alone with him. You see, he had been preparing for this. He even bought a high-quality recorder he could hide in his pocket to capture everything. He was excited, thinking of all the ways he could reject my sister's advances, insult her, and then share the recording with my family. So off he went, thrilled to meet them, and returned later elated. Babe, you won't believe the awful things they wanted. Babe, we can screw them over so badly. There are so many possibilities. I was confused and wanted to hear the recording, but he wisely suggested it would be better to hear him out first to avoid misunderstanding. Well, he went there, and instead of flirting, my parents and sister sat him down. After some grumbling about their disapproval of him, my judgment, etc., they declared they were willing to pay for my wedding on one condition. My sister would walk down the aisle first. My parents insisted that my sister would walk down the aisle at my wedding in a wedding dress. Their reasoning was that it wasn't appropriate for a younger sister to marry before an older one, so it was only fair that my sister at least experience it at my venue, with photos taken in the dress, and she would even get a cake afterward. Now my husband will share his part. Hey, vengeful husband here. Hell hath no fury like a pro-revenge instant karma nuclear revenge lurker when his beloved is scorned. That said, as much as my wife, she's my wife now, paints me as this quick-witted guy, I admit my neurons almost short-circuited when those folks genuinely suggested that nonsense as if it were some grand gift. Even Troy would rather bring in the horse a second time, I think. Alas, after my brain rebooted, I had a whole list of insults ready to unleash, but something deep inside urged me to string these fools along. So I said I needed time to think and see how my wife, back then my fiancée, would react. Then I dashed out of there before I could reveal my wicked plans. Back to me, the wife. So my husband sincerely recounted how my parents wanted even my wedding to be about my sister, wearing a grin on his face and the recording to back it up. I was shocked. The distance had softened how poorly they treated me, and I thought even they wouldn't go that far. Fortunately, my husband's insistence on revenge helped me avoid spiraling into a negative mindset. We had a blast brainstorming ways to get back at them, ranging from absurdly outrageous to what we thought was doable. We then called his much more level-headed brother when we settled on a plan. It involved having 2 venue addresses and giving them the wrong one, etc. Well, the level-headed brother scolded us for that. While he acknowledged he could never convince us to avoid retaliation, he at least pointed out that something like that would be challenging to pull off. Some of our other ideas were also at risk of getting us sued, so we eventually opted for the most benign plan. Act like we agreed, but then hire security to keep her out. Of course, if that was all, it wouldn't be true revenge. The rest is mostly my husband's doing, but he wants me to take the lead. So here goes. It's important to mention that everything he did was discussed with me beforehand, and they were our joint ideas. He returned to my parents, stating he probed and thought I wouldn't be okay with it. However, he didn't see any issue and, not wanting the family to fall apart, would be willing to help them do it. He pointed out that I dislike conflict, so if I was caught off guard, I might not react negatively in front of everyone. On the other hand, marriage is a significant event, so who knows if I might lash out. Thus, he proposed a compromise. They would assist in covering expenses. This way, I would feel even more pressure to stay quiet, as not only would we be public with our families present, but I'd also feel grateful for their support. He said my parents looked shocked, and my grown sister literally started skipping with joy like a child, so it was accepted. Importantly, my husband also claimed that due to some poor judgment and past boyfriends, these words were all my idea, and I'm so proud to use their own words against them. I was distrustful and controlling, often checking his phone to ensure he wasn't cheating on me. Thus, it was crucial that none of this plan was documented in any form. For anything related to my sister walking down the aisle before me, he would visit their house for discussions. And so began the months of deception, where my parents and sister believed they were outsmarting me, while my husband and I were taking advantage of them. Instead of funding the wedding, they kept a low profile. Naturally, my parents wanted to be involved in every detail, including aspects that were significant to me like the song choices and color scheme. My husband would persuade them to back off to keep me in check, but since we never cared much about the ceremony itself, everything else was fair game. At least, that's what they thought. Here's what we did. We would review drink and menu options, then select the cheapest or second cheapest choice. My husband would secretly take my sister to sample the food, then sigh and say it was unfortunate we didn't want to take advantage of my parents' generosity, so we'd settle for less. This would prompt my sister to demand that my parents pay for the best options. My parents would then assure me not to worry, saying they'd cover the most expensive choices. The same tactic was used for the photographer and flowers. My husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we liked, then sadly mentioned how I preferred some other unattractive flowers. This led my parents to insist we go with those flowers, promising to pay for them. When it came to the wedding dress, we hit a small snag. My parents wanted me to wear a dress that was quite unflattering. Okay, it wasn't outright hideous, but it wasn't my style and wouldn't suit me. We planned to agree to it and then simply not use it, but my mom sent me a message about it for proof that I had said yes. We had to maintain my refusal to text and stand firm. My husband went over there and said he'd see what he could do. My sister suggested ruining my preferred dress so that I'd be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to go along with her idea. Throughout this time, we ensured all communications were kept off text. We accomplished this by having me respond to my sister whenever she tried messaging my husband. This reinforced the claims my husband was making about being controlling and neurotic, so they believed it and avoided putting anything in writing. Some people might not appreciate their partner speaking negatively about them to family, but I'm such a pushover that the idea of being seen as controlling and dangerous is incredibly amusing to me, and I encouraged him to do it. I suppose I have a twisted sense of humor. Oh, and my sister did attempt to flirt with him, but he feigned conflict to really sell the act that he was with them. My husband would pretend to share things with them without my knowledge, but he never mentioned that we had hired security. It was genuinely hilarious. My husband and I, who had seriously considered a courthouse wedding to save money for our honeymoon, ended up planning this extravagant, costly wedding while barely spending a penny. We called it a way to compensate for the emotional damage caused by my parents. I think my husband, okay, he just confirmed I'm right, was enjoying the entire trick more than the wedding planning itself. I never thought I'd witness a guy beaming at the prospect of wasting his entire Saturday driving around discussing wedding details with his in-laws. But here we are. Soon the big day arrived. The plan devised by my parents, sister, and husband was to wait until everyone was seated, as the bride traditionally arrives late. They intended for my sister to show up at that exact moment to prevent me from seeing her and trying to stop the situation, allowing her to walk down the aisle. By the time I learned what had happened, it would be too late to intervene. As for my dress, we saved some leftover fabric from the alterations. My husband took that to my parents' house, where my sister still lived, and showed them as proof that he had ruined the dress, then claimed he needed to return to me as I was upset and he had to calm me down. He told them he'd see them at the wedding. We made sure to keep our rail security hidden at first. As guests and my parents arrived, they only saw a woman with a list of names to check. Only after my parents settled in did we reveal the actual security, a guy who looked like a bodyguard. We instructed him not to let my sister in and promised a generous tip if he kept our instructions confidential. Soon the moment arrived. My parents received a text that my sister was less than 5 minutes away, prompting my dad to signal for the ceremony to begin. My bridesmaids had been prepped to follow his lead, so they did so without consulting me. Once they took their places, my dad stood at the entrance waiting for me. During this time, a friend who wasn't in the wedding party texted me to get ready, avoiding suspicion if my husband or bridesmaids started messaging me. This friend, an ally of my husband, was eager to stir up drama just like he was, and didn't mind not being a bridesmaid. As soon as my dad took his position, the bridal song began. The doors opened and I stepped inside. My dad was taken aback to see me. He tried to look behind me but couldn't see the venue entrance from where we were, so he had no clue what had happened to my sister. Then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID, it was her. He left me with a mumbled excuse about something coming up. Gasps and confusion filled the room. The friend in on the plan loudly asked what happened. I lied, tearfully claiming he said it wasn't supposed to be me there. My husband and I had agreed that if my dad abandoned me, I should say that to make him look as bad as possible. The tears weren't just for show. I was genuinely hurt and trying not to cry. The friend then loudly asked what he meant by, "It shouldn't be you," so everyone could hear and spread it. Then she declared, "I'll go check," and ran off. We orchestrated this so she could create chaos with security and prevent my dad from returning to halt the ceremony. Eventually my mom also left. At this point my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned that he might need to intervene. His desperate rush to me made me smile. I walked down the aisle amidst whispers as people discussed what had transpired. Some left to check as well. When I reached my husband, everything was fine. He comforted me, joking that my sad expression was so convincing I deserved an Oscar, and reassured me he'd handle my parents for what they did. We got married without any further issues. My parents didn't return. I noticed many people leaving and coming back during the reception, but no one dared to inform me about what was happening. Someone whispered in my husband's ear, and he went out. He returned later with a thunderous expression but quietly told me he needed to hide before he broke character and started smiling. It worked. Here's the summary I received from friends, family, the security guy, and my husband afterward. My sister arrived in a wedding dress, but the security refused her entry as we had agreed. He informed her she must be at the wrong venue since there was already a bride. Yes, we tipped him generously as promised. My dad attempted to threaten him with the police, claiming he had never seen him before, so he couldn't be working there. The security guy agreed to call the police since he was hired by us and was merely doing his job. My dad realized it was too late and tried to demand that he let my sister in. At this point, my friend approached, shouting and insulting my sister, asking what was going on, essentially stalling. My mom soon arrived, followed by others. By then, the wedding plan was in shambles. All my parents could do was damage control as everyone who learned about it was appalled they would attempt such a thing. People began screaming and berating them. The three of them naturally claimed it wasn't a secret and blamed my husband. When he was called over, my husband put on his best confused expression and denied everything. To quote him, "Gaslight, gatekeeper, girl boss." He denied ever agreeing to such a ludicrous plan. When they insisted he demanded proof, and of course they couldn't provide any. All the text exchanges they could show were about regular wedding decisions. My sister was crying and apparently sat on the floor kicking her legs like a child. My dad looked like he wanted to hit my husband, but security and other guests held him back. Naturally, they claimed they had no proof because my husband had instructed them not to text. My husband laughed, saying, "Wow, how convenient, huh?" Then he repeated, "Why would I ever agree to something so messed up?" He tore into them for being terrible parents and stated he wouldn't let their foolish plans and lies ruin his wedding, then returned to me. No one believed them. The venue had cameras, but they wouldn't show me the footage as it was solely for security purposes. However, some guests filmed parts of the event. Watching my parents and sister get ripped apart by everyone who came to witness the drama was delightful. After years of being falsely accused and not being believed, seeing them experience a taste of their own medicine was one of the best wedding gifts. My mother was in tears, my dad kept shifting from purple to white, and my sister was still on the floor crying and screaming. They kept insisting my husband was in on it, but people kept asking why he would agree, why there was no proof, and why they wanted my sister to do this at my wedding. They had no satisfactory answers. Eventually, they were told to leave and had no choice but to comply. My dad apparently had to drag my sister up as she refused to leave the ground. Again, people said nothing to me all night. I guess they wanted to protect me, and maybe it's because I was the bride and not just a guest for once, but it felt like everyone was making an extra effort to be kind, positive, and excited about everything. My husband says all the expensive food and drinks certainly helped. We had a fantastic time. My husband maintained the forced angry expression for only a short while before breaking into smiles again. Afterward, we went to the hotel to catch some sleep before heading off on our honeymoon. Speaking of which, my parents did attempt to pay for our plane tickets, but we thought that was risky since they could try to cancel them, so we declined. Since then, the three of them have tried to contact me. I've ignored their calls because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail. A smart move because my sister eventually messaged me. I won't repeat what she said as it was very unhinged and didn't make much sense, but the key point was that she blamed me for her humiliation. She called my husband a two-faced snake who fooled them for months. He wants to print that and hang it on our wall, and hoped but was also certain that I'd get cheated on by him. She even suggested he was cheating on me with her. My husband took my phone, screenshot the call logs, my sister's messages, and some texts from my parents demanding I pick up the phone, and sent it all to our family group chat. He also sent screenshots of messages to him where they called him names and threatened him, but he maintained the "I never agreed to anything" stance and even threatened to sue them for defamation and harassment. He wrote a message in the group chat pleading with my family for help, as I was now being harassed by them constantly. He implored them to stop my parents and sister from ruining our honeymoon after they failed to ruin our wedding. He concluded with a request to not share our locations to prevent my parents from sending my sister over and claiming he had somehow agreed to pretend to sleep with her in our honeymoon suite. My family assured him they'd handle it, and since then we've had peace. My husband is a bit disappointed my sister didn't disobey, so he could confront her again while ripping her a new one. We'll see if the peace lasts. All in all, while I would have preferred a normal, loving family at my wedding, at least for once in my life, they not only failed to ruin something meaningful to me, but I also got back at them. Extra info. Do I know why they treat me this way? I've been asked this question a lot, so I assume you all are curious as well. I've pondered this my whole life and still don't have an answer. When I was young I tried asking, but they denied any difference and scolded me for being spoiled, so I stopped trying. I've considered many possibilities, but based on my observations, I think it's this. I was unplanned. They took a long time to have my sister, so she was not only wanted but also seen as a miracle child after such a long wait. However, given our small age gap, I think they didn't expect to have another child so soon or easily and didn't use adequate protection after my sister was born. Maybe they didn't realize my mom was pregnant until it was too late, so they were burdened with an unplanned baby while still managing a newborn. They aren't well off, so the extra expense likely didn't help, and they resented me. But that's just my conjecture. Regardless, I've accepted that the reason doesn't truly matter. What they did to me was unjust, no matter the circumstances. Did they genuinely believe this would work? My husband and I theorize that they never intended to follow through at all. We think my sister threw a fit over me getting married first when she barely gets dates, and they made my husband that outrageous proposal. They didn't want to pay for my wedding and didn't think we'd agree or that it would even reflect well on them. By suggesting it and being refused, they could appear as the good guys to my sister while having an excuse not to contribute a dime. But then my husband accepted it, and they couldn't backtrack without risking my sister turning against them. Thank you for reading. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more shocking real-life stories happening around you.